Hello, and welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. I'm Adam Huss, coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Thanks so much for listening. The sponsor for this episode is Vermont Vineyards. That's VT, like Vermont. Vermont Vineyards is a family-run business owned and operated out of small-town Vermont. They design and install vineyards of all shapes and sizes, whether you're hoping to establish your own custom home vineyard or you're a winery looking to add a couple of planted acres. The team at Vermont Vineyards will help you grow your grape growing dream into a reality. Serving Vermont, New England, and beyond, Vermont Vineyards aims to reduce stigmas attached to hybrid grape varieties and New England wine regions while bringing cold climate viticulture into the backyard where it can be enjoyed as a hobby or a passion. If you've ever considered making your own wine, this is a great way to get started. To get a sense of what a project with Vermont Vineyards might look like, reach out to Stephen by visiting vermontvineyards.com/OWP for Organic Wine Podcast. That's VTVineyards with an S.com/OWP. And strangely, the OWP has to be lowercase. I also have an interview with Stephen that I'll be releasing in just a couple weeks because he has a great story and we talk about some of the important things you should know before planting your own vineyard. So stay tuned. Also, I want to give a special thanks to the Patreon subscribers who inspire and humble me and who make this podcast possible. Thank you so much. If you would like to support this podcast, you'll find the link to our Patreon page in the show notes. And now I'd like to introduce you to a source of inspiration for me personally and my guest for this episode, Marreya Bailey. Marreya's winery is Mad Marvlus, which, as she mentioned, sounds like a superhero name. And maybe that's appropriate. Marreya doesn't really make wine with Mad Marvlus. She creates living embodiments of personality and spirit that you can drink. She calls them her creatures. Don't expect just grapes, but any and every natural thing that produces sugar and flavor in her environment. Don't expect traditional wine either, unless by traditional you mean the actual traditions from cultures around the globe that were practiced for millennia prior to this strange thing that has happened for the last 50 years. Marreya is also the founding mother and co-partner of the Bathing Collective, which you'll just have to listen to find out what it is, and the future that it hopes to bring about. I had never talked to Marreya before this interview, and I didn't know much other than what I could glean from the Mad Marvlus website and Instagram. As she started speaking, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I basically said hello, and she spent the next hour talking about everything that I believe and care about. You may actually hear me laughing in the background at times because I was thinking about all of you who may have been listening for a while, assuming that I either asked her to talk because I knew and agreed with so much of her ideas or that I paid her to say what she's saying. I didn't, I swear. I hope you enjoy her enthusiasm and passion as much as I did. Marreya, welcome. Thank you for doing this. I'm looking forward to talking.
Yes, thank you so much, Adam. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much, and good morning to you.
Good morning. Yeah, I love this morning time too. So, can you start by sort of introducing yourself and Mad Marvlus? You know what it is you're doing there, and some of maybe the bathing collective as well, just to you know set up some of the things that you're involved in right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Uh, Good morning, everybody. My name is Marreya Bailey. I am the founder, the owner, and natural wine and cider producer for the California natural wine and cider brand called Mad Marvelous Wine, aka Mad Marvelous. So it's a play on my name. And as I share with people, when they first meet me, I'm a scientific mind with an artistic heart. So that coincides with the whole name, Mad Scientist and Marvelous. M as in Mary, ARV as in Victor, LUS, like a name. I mean, because one of the first things I heard when I mentioned this before I released it out into the world to some friends, they were like, this sounds like a superhero name. I'm like, well, like, I love that. I'm humbled by it. And I guess
Yeah.
we can look at it like that because my brand focuses on producing high quality, unique, personality driven natural wines and ciders uh, that range from the usage of organic, biodynamic, grown fruit in addition to foraged fruit and sometimes botanicals that are all climate friendly, meaning they thrive relatively well amongst climate change, or they could be drought tolerant, they could be frost resistant, to just, not needing a lot of water love, I should say, or a lot of
Yeah.
tending to in general. And these are a lot of varieties like when we talk about apples. I mean, apples, I feel people miss out on because, especially now, we need to pay more attention to because they are a little more climate friendly than wine grapes are, like Vitis vinifera. And there's so many of them. There's a plethora of different cultivars I feel people are missing out on. They have so much character and they kind of resemble, wine grapes in some ways, like tannic apples, like Arkansas Black or a Black Twig, Wixing Crab. I think
Yeah.
that's one that more people are commonly used to hearing that I typically use in my ciders. I want them to be alive. And that's why I kind of call them affectionately my creatures, because I don't manipulate nor control the integrity nor the personality of any of my ciders or wines at all. And that's why I don't use a lot of sulfur. I use native yeast fermentations. I will minimize the amount of sulfur if it's absolutely necessary, or just not add any sulfur. So I do have 0.0 wines and ciders that I produce that all have very vivacious names. I mean, so for instance, you have a apple quince co-fermented cider infused with lemon verbena and Roman German chamomile I freshly foraged for. That's called Palm
Mm.
Quincy. And this is like it's a relatively like complex, like wine like cider. It's not sweet. I don't make sweet ciders. I make bone ass dry ones, just like how they're supposed to be made. And
Yeah.
and that's something where I feel people will get a better understanding as to, what all is in that cider or wine. I mean, people get confused at times when they have that because they're asking me, "Is this a white wine? Because this tastes like a white wine, but it's not made of grapes at all." So I'm a little confused. I'm like, well, remember, let's think of Merriam-Webster, all those dictionary definitions. What is wine? Wine is it's fermented fruit. It's
Yep.
fermented fruit. That's what it is. So why are we just focused on Vitis vinifera making high quality, fine, exceptional wines when you look further back in ancient practices in Egypt, in Ethiopia, and parts of Asia, even, they have been making some of the most legendary, integral, like foundational fermented beverages in human history. And people forget about that. And they forget that a lot of them were working with honey or they're working
Mm.
with apples, may occasionally work with grapes, but grapes weren't the only thing on the menu. They weren't
Yeah.
the only thing in the winery at all either. So they were working with fruit that still exemplified their culture, their terroir, and they were working with the planet a little bit more in a sense of, wellness was their focus. And that's another key piece with Mad Marvlus is we want people to feel good after they drink our wines and ciders. And we want people not to feel hungover. We don't want people to have headaches from too much sulfur additions or any artificial ingredients. We want them to feel like they can take on the world afterwards. Not to say, it's a superhero thing. I don't
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to put anything like that, but that's why I infused Palm Quincy with lemon verbena and chamomile. It's not going to make you pass out, but it is going to make you feel chill, and it's a glue.
Yeah.
It's totally like a porch pounder, as I love to say. It's one of those where
Yeah.
you can either like sit on a porch and people watch somebody and enjoy like a couple of glasses, maybe the whole bottle, or you could just decide I'm going to sip this and really appreciate it, like the wellness based focus that it provides me. And then
Yeah.
we're on the other side of the spectrum with Mad Maxine. So Mad Maxine is what I call a big bad bold ass red, how I love
Okay.
my reds.
Yeah.
And think of cab, think of cabs, think of like those big zins. Like it has that kind of personality, but wilder because there is no common Vitis vinifera in that wine. It's 100% natural red blend with certified organic Syrah from Grist Vineyard, which is a legendary vineyard in Dry Creek Valley in Sonoma County. And then you also have some wild red hybrid grapes that have been growing untouched, unsprayed for at least 20 years amongst wild blackberry vines, wild olive trees outside of Sacramento. And then you have Teinturier hybrids and native grapes that were picked outside of Sacramento County as well. And these are red flesh. These are rare, but people
Yeah.
forget that, yes, they were blended historically in other wines, a lot of European wines, to give color. Because when you press the grape, red juice comes out, unlike other common red
Right.
wine grapes like Cab, right? So with that, they have a thicker skin too. They have more phenolic acid. So they have more of that protection in the bottle that they provide, where it allows me not to add sulfur to the wine. So that is why that is a 0-0 wine. I don't add sulfur unless it's absolutely necessary, and it's not going to be no more than 40 parts per million sulfur because I want people to enjoy it. And
Yeah.
that is the reason why I called it Mad Maxine, is because that is symbolic for the future where wine is heading. All the fruit in there is climate friendly. All of it is drought tolerant. And it doesn't
Yeah.
need a lot of water like Pinot does or Chardonnay, you know? Like those two
Uh,
those two grape varieties I feel like they may be very popular right now because of European influence and politics. However, they're really not going to be that relevant in the next 5 years, I feel like, because they can't keep up with climate change. They're very prone to frost. And that's another reason why I feel Mad Marvelous is part of the of where the future of wine and cider are heading, because we need to pay more attention to the usage of underrepresented fruit varieties. We need to pay attention to the usage of working more with cider, and then also being open to creating more sustainable byproducts out of grape skins. And I know, with Paquette, shout out to Wild Ark Farm, Todd out
yep.
there,
Yep. Yep.
to, quite a few others all over the place. Like,
Yeah.
not only on the East Coast, but the West Coast doing this. They forget, though, what about apples instead of water? Why? Like, I live out in California, as you know. I live out in Sonoma County,
Yep.
and we're experiencing a drought. And right now, instead of the usage of water, why aren't people focused on making a sustainable byproduct by rehydrating the grape skins that are usually composted or thrown out by winemakers, mind you, with
Yeah.
unfermented apple juice? So rehydrate those grape skins with apples. There's so
Yep.
many. And this is
y-
the time that we need to be able to save these orchards, especially the ones that are very old and have so
Yeah.
many cool, unique, flavorful varieties out there. And we know they're water retentive. So why aren't we
Yeah.
using them more? And this is why we need to really focus on working with what the land and nature provide us more instead of forcing. We need to be able to work with climate change, not against it. It's too late to be working against it, guys. Way too late. So for all these billionaires out here that are donating like Patagonia to fight climate change, no, you need to be like investing into small businesses like us. Okay? Like we're the ones that are making a change. We're working with what nature's providing us by responding with nature, with creativity and ingenuity. So when it comes to like why I founded Mad Marvelous in the first place, I this was after being in the wine industry like on and off for about a decade. So I started in wine officially back in 2015, and this was when my educational background is involving biological science and psychology. So I got my BA degree in Minnesota, where I was raised,
Uh-huh.
um, through with anthropology. I obtained a bachelor's degree in anthropology with an emphasis of forensic science. So I took genetics, biochem, biology, chemistry, and that's where my mindset is. That's why I tell people I'm a scientific mind. I love science. I love nature. And I got my master's degree in IO psychology. So if you really put that together, I love analyzing human behavior and nature. I really do. Like if you break it down, I do. So, but I
Yeah.
also love working with them. That's what inspires me to create the way I do. And people, society, experiences, nature are some of the most profound muses that I feel like, we can really take a lot from as artists and even entrepreneurs and scientists. So that's what I do. And I eventually was in the corporate world and I'm like, okay, all right, this is very stressful for me. Like I wasn't able to have a really healthy living life balance even though I wanted to help people. And I realized, you know what, I can still help people through my other passion. So this was around the time I moved from Minnesota to Ohio. I was finishing up my master's degree in IO psychology, and I had the ability to like have the flexibility to do it online to a degree. So I was down there living with my parents, and I'm like, well, I can't just be in school. I got to work too. I'm like one of those people. I can't just
Yeah.
like do one thing. I'm
Yep.
a multitasker, like at heart. So I found a part time job because the economy was not that hot right at the time when I arrived to Ohio in 2015 for me to get a full time job in HR. And that was along the lines of my master's degree. I needed to get that hands on experience. So I said to myself, well, what's the next best thing? I need to go after my passion, which was wine. I wanted to pursue that more. So I found this Cincinnati wine shop, this really old one called the Wine Merchant. Walked in there the first day I visited, was not expecting anything. I just so happened to look around and I was impressed with their selection. I saw, wow, they have all the wines, categorized by region and then subcategorized by subregion, like, all of it. And I never saw so much organization in a wine shop, like with such a large variety. They had a cellar, I mean, they had a wine vault, everything, an area for wine tastings and pairings. So I just so happened to shoot my shot that day. I was like, hey, I'm a grad student. However, I'm also interested in becoming a sommelier. And I know I want to get the hands-on experience. I've been studying on and off for the last year or so amongst my own graduate studies, and I wanted to see if I could get a part-time job here. And they were like, well, you know what? That's amazing. We would love to like hire you. However, let's like have you come back tomorrow for an interview with your resume, da 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 da. So I was not expecting that at all. And came back the next day, shared with them my passions. And they said, well, none of us here are sommeliers. However, we do have one. I take that back. There was one, but like there were a total of 5 owners of this shop. And all of them collectively had over 100 years of experience in wine from traveling all over the world, working for wineries, you name it. So she was one of the owners who was interviewing me was just very welcoming. She's like, you know what? We may not have that status, but we have the knowledge and we have the experience, and we'd love to like share that with you while you work here. So that was a crash course for me. I
Amazing.
wasn't there for a year. I mean, it felt like it because I ended up getting a wine buyer role right after that, working for a larger corporation, and was a cheesemonger for them. But during that time, I learned so much. I learned everything from deductive wine tasting to distribution to, negotiating prices on wholesale to, just wine and food pairings, but in real life, not just reading in a textbook or anything. So that
Right.
that was great, and I applied that to my next role, where I was involved with wine buying, cheesemongering, and really like launching a wine bar. So I did all of that, and eventually, amongst all of that, working at other wine bars, wine shops. In 2019, I ended up going through the court. I guess I should call it formally the Court of Master Sommeliers,
Yeah.
and I know now it's known as the Court of Sommelier. So I went through there. And then after I took my exam, I mean, of course we know, like after you take one of those exams, you need your brain to rest because it's a brain overload of information. And I was coming straight off of 2018 graduating with my graduate degree. So if you can imagine, this was like nonstop, like Drake's song. Like this is a really like nonstop. I was going from school to the next school, which was the court. That's what I was doing. So after that, I said, all right, I am done with formal education. Okay. Like I am done. And at this point, I said to myself, I'm a hands on learner. I'm also an artist, and I need to work a harvest.
Yeah.
I want to become a wine producer. And I was like, after working for wine bars, wine shops, building wine programs, I'm like, what else is there? I was bored at that point.
Yeah.
And I know, like, in wine, one of the best parts, and this is what one of the reasons why it attracted me when I transitioned from the corporate world to wine 100% in 2020, was it's an ever evolving, long, like, lifelong learning type of atmosphere, type of world to be in. You have to be a lifelong learner in order to thrive in this industry. You have to. And that's one of the things
Yeah.
I share with people. I am a lifelong learner, whether it's formal or it's on the streets or it's, with different types of multifaceted experiences. As long as they're hands on, I will do that. So I worked my first harvest after getting in touch with Martha Stoneman's former marketing director, head of marketing, through
Oh yeah.
Instagram in
Oh, so you,
2019.
you worked with Martha?
Yeah, I did. I
Oh,
worked with
oh, what a great
Martha.
intro. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I did some research on her, as she knows, before I even reached out. I did, and that's what I do. Like, I'm like, well, who do I want to, like, strive to become? And after doing the research, I saw Deirdre Heekin of La Garagista. I saw she was doing
Gotcha.
amazing things out in Vermont, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's probably going to be a bit until I head out to Vermont. Again, this is 2019, so, but I love the fact they were working with hybrid grapes, and I'm just like,
Yes. Yeah.
oh my god, like, this is the future. And
Yeah.
again, like I said, like I shared with you at the beginning, I'm from Minnesota. I'm originally from Wisconsin. So if for people listening to this, you'll know the ties between Minnesota and Wisconsin when it comes to hybrid grapes. The
Yeah.
University of Minnesota has cultivated quite a few
Of the
very
most
well
popular
known.
ones now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like Marquette,
Yeah.
I think Petit Pearl, the
Ita-
France. Yeah. The
yeah, Itasca, I think.
yes,
Uh
Itasca, Front
yeah.
Noir, Front Gris,
Well, and
Front Blanc,
then
all of
and Tom
those.
I don't know if you know Tom Plocker. I interviewed him, but he's right outside of Minneapolis, and
Oh,
he's
cool.
got he's got his own private breeding program, and he has like I want to say 5 varieties that are now some of the most popular ones. Like Petit Pearl is his, and Verona and Crimson
Yeah.
Pearl, and then a couple that are kind of unnamed at the moment. But yeah,
Yes.
like it's that it's the what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention because they
Yeah.
want to grow grapes, but it's brutal in the winter up there, and they're
Absolutely.
trying to make some hardy stuff.
It's the
Plus a
frozen
great, I
tundra
mean,
for a reason.
yeah, Minnesota is like, I mean, it's Cornell, Minnesota, and Davis are like our three
Mhm.
big pillars. I mean, I know there are some other great schools, Fresno and Cal Poly, and scattered around who do great viticulture and enology programs. But those three have huge, big breeding programs and libraries of
Mhm.
wines and everything. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So
sorry,
I
I
was oh
keep
no, you're
going. Yeah.
good. You're totally good. I know, like, I sometimes go down rabbit holes and then we segue, and as long as people can keep up and go back, we're good. So
Well,
with that,
yeah. Well, I'm gonna since I'm interjecting, I'm just gonna interject and
yeah,
say I am so happy we're talking. Like honestly, I feel
yeah.
like we were twins that were separated at birth and somehow found
I
our way to
love it.
each other. Like I mean,
Yeah.
really, my path has followed a similar trajectory to yours in so many ways, and I'll come back to
Mhm.
that. But
Great.
I mean, if anybody who is listening to this and who has listened to multiple episodes will know, like I basically don't have to say anything because you are saying the things that I've been saying with every episode of this show.
Great.
Like it's amazing. Like it's true. I'm resisting saying amen repeatedly as you're speaking. So
Say it, say it. I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, in terms of just, like, reaction, like, it's organic for real. It totally is. So
yeah.
in response to everything happening, like, this is why people need to pay more attention to not
So
only what's going on here, but
yes.
everywhere in the United States. So, but yeah, anyway, I was gonna say
Well,
though,
yeah, I
with
cut you off.
that,
You see, it sounds like you picked like if I was going to suggest to you two
yeah.
people to have as the best possible mentors with the greatest spectrum, it would be Martha and Deirdre. It sounds like you got
Yeah,
them. You found them yourself.
definitely.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I would say with Deirdre, we stay in touch, like, via phone occasionally, and we're on a friend basis, and then same with Martha as well at this point. I mean, I look at both of them as sheroes in my
Yeah.
eyes, even though they're
So
both very
generous too.
humble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both very humble, but I mean, they're badass women. And
Yeah.
shout out to the fact it is Women's Month,
Hey.
celebrating women's history. And I this says speaks volumes about who I am and how I was raised. I'll just say that and go back to it, because I was raised around a lot of strong, powerful, highly intelligent, fierce, fearless women. And that's who I exemplify to be. So when I see there's already women like that in the wine industry who are farmers, who are moms, who are married, who are business women, who try to, maintain a healthy living life balance at the same time, and are tearing it up when it comes to the wines and co-ferments that they're producing, and they're revolutionizing the industry. I mean, it's insane. And they're two of a few I can name, but the few, it's a very small sphere of, like, the women who are very hands-on with their wine production. And that's how I strive to be. That's why I did the research on them, because I'm like, okay, I wanna somehow, like, work with them somehow. Okay, like in
Yep.
2019. And
Yep.
it came sooner than I thought. I mean, like I said, in 2019 I was prepping to leave the corporate world. I was like, I'm burnt out from this. This is not where I don't feel like I'm being appreciated. I need to just, you know, build my own business. I have the skill set to do that, and I know I don't know everything, but that's why you get the hands-on experience. That's why you ask,
Yep.
people, and you get the mentors. You get in touch and connect with the right people who also are championing you at the same time. It's a mutual feeling. I curated. I was intended. I was very intentional with how I was going to curate my wine production experience, especially like entering into that realm of the wine industry, because the wine industry is very multifaceted. You got the retail part. I had experience in that. You got the distribution. You got hospitality. You have the logistics and the business side, but you also have the production side and the viticulture side. And I knew I wanted to get hands-on experience in both. So it worked out where in early 2020, right before the pandemic, I got in touch with Rosalind Reynolds of ME Wines, who was the internship coordinator of PAX Wines, and everyone under that whole umbrella of a winery. So Pax basically created his winery into a winery co-op in some way by allowing Martha, Rain Winery, Carlo Mondavi's label. At the time I was there, Scott and Jenny Schultz of Jolie Lade, in addition to Monterey Cellars and a few more that were housed there, had the ability to share resources and produce their wines all there. Okay, like, I mean, this was
Yeah.
more than what I bargained for. This is more than
Yeah.
what I bargained for. Like, I had no idea Martha was producing her wine in a co-shared space like that in some way. But one thing I noticed was that, okay, it was Pax that owned the whole property, right? From what I understood. But I loved how they were working together. That was key. They were all
Yeah.
working together under one roof. They were all helping each other out with producing their wines together. They
Yeah.
weren't, it wasn't just one producer, there, like you typically see in the wine world. And consumers, I feel like, don't really understand this either. It's very unique to see this. It's a unicorn moment that we need to see more of, where you have multiple producers under one roof sharing space and eventually sharing equity, in that space that they own, that not only is allowing the production of their brands, but also potentially a house brand down the line. So that was interesting for me to see my first harvest during COVID, amongst all that fires, smoke taint. And we basically had to come up with a modified form of communication by talking through masks. So if you can imagine, that was a pretty surreal experience.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like very,
Yeah.
very surreal experience. But I loved every second of it. I did not know what to expect. Everyone was moving fast. You had to think quickly on your feet. Um, but I loved it. I loved how adventurous it was. It was very adrenaline rushing for me. And I knew, this there may be elements in this that are very dangerous. There may be elements in this that are very innovative and creative. However, I loved every second of it. Every second. There may be times wherein you're exhausted to the point where you get what is called harvest brain. So for those listeners who don't know what harvest brain is where you may forget the time of the day, what day of the week it is, where you are at times, because you're so focused and immersed in the wine production process. Like your body, like you've already gone beyond, exerting your body, your mind, and your soul. Like
Yeah.
that's where it's like you're on a whole other level and you're just like working on the time of the grapes. And
Yeah.
it was just a rush. It's a rush. And I understood why people were attracted to working harvest, why you hear of people chasing harvests around the world.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's a thrill.
Yeah.
So
It's like being in
during
the
all
zone,
that,
like that
yeah,
zone,
it
the
totally
the
is.
zone. What is that? It's the flow state where you're just like, yeah,
You're
but
just going.
it's like longer than almost anything else. Like
It
it's
is.
like it lasts for weeks as opposed to like,
Yeah.
like an hour or whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Harvest, like on average, depending on where you are in the world, can last like from 2 months to 4 months, depending on if it's also not only wine harvest, but apple harvest, because apple
Right.
harvest is a little longer. It starts in July out here. And a lot of people are unaware it ends in November, sometimes early December, depending on what apple varieties you're looking for. So
Yeah.
it's pretty insane. Like, and I loved every second. I was like, okay, this is where I need to be. And during that time, while I was exhausted, I somehow dug deep and had the energy and the motivation to write my business plan for my wine label. And it was crazy, like in terms of that. Like that's how much I was on fire,
Yeah.
symbolically speaking. I mean, no pun intended, because California was on fire during that time
Right.
too. But
Right.
I mean, I feel like in that
Oh,
time though,
this
for me, I
this
feel
is
like in that
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Finish your thought. No, finish your thought.
Oh, I was gonna say, I feel like in that time for me, that was a time for me to go like chase after my dreams.
Yeah.
And there were less distractions in the world, and I was able to do that and then go over to Vermont that same year and work my second harvest. So I went there
Oh yeah,
in yeah, I went there,
because
worked.
they're like a later harvest, right? Is
Yes,
that what?
yep,
Yeah.
there's overlaps a little bit
Right.
out
Right.
there. And
Yeah.
I know because like for instance this year I know like out here harvest is gonna, I'm sure, start even sooner. Last year it was mid-July. This year who knows, it could be a little earlier. And out there it's just a little later than out here. I mean by like a few weeks, I want to say, maybe a month depending on where you are. But in Vermont, that was a whole trip of an experience, and I loved it. In terms of what I
Yeah.
learned, in terms of
Yeah.
what I was exposed to, I got the opportunity to harvest, not only like be in the cellar and be a seasonal assistant winemaker with somebody else, and this was a smaller volume production, mind you, in comparison to out in California where I was coming from. I mean, this was less than 1,000 cases, 2,000 cases maybe. And this was with a ratchet press. This was with like a hydraulic ratchet press. This was
Yeah.
me like, I mean, it wasn't like one of those massive pneumatic like bladder presses that you see, crank out like 5, 10 ton, 15 tons worth of fruit into like juice. This was like a 1 ton basket press, a hydraulic one. I mean, this
Yeah.
was like as OG as you possibly can make it. And I loved how like arduous and how like strenuous, like the labor intense like aspect of it is what made it even more rewarding for me, because
Ah, totally.
we're
Yeah.
working with demijohns. We're working with neutral French oak barrels, and in comparison to the big stainless steel 5-ton, 10-ton tanks that I was or concrete tanks that I was exposed to at out in California. I mean, it
Right.
was polar opposite, but then also got the opportunity to harvest hybrid grapes, over 30 varieties out in New Hampshire, and then
Yeah.
apples out in Vermont and Burlington for cider. I mean, apple varieties that don't grow out in California, but are still
Right.
amazing in cider. So like
Yes.
Millennium or Northern Lights versus out on the West Coast, you have Newtown Pippin. I think they actually both grow on both coasts. Yeah, I think they
Yeah.
do.
That one.
Yeah, new, but they taste way different because of the terroir, right? Like because of the
Yes.
whole
Yeah.
climate. So I was very fascinated by that, and they were working with co-ferments. They were doing
Yeah.
apple grape because that's what mostly grows out there. That's cider country first and
Yeah.
foremost out there, and maple syrup. I mean, using
Yep.
that as dosage. Who would have
Yeah.
thought? Like instead of cane sugar, I'm like, these people are fucking geniuses. Like, what in the
Yeah.
world? Like, and I'm not a huge fan of like maple syrup on like in ferments, like to a degree personally, but I loved why they were doing it. I loved how they were
Right.
being sustainable. They were being
Right.
very
Right. Yeah.
sustainable, working with elderberries out there. I
I
mean,
think it's even
aronia
better than
berries.
sustainable. You know what? I'm
It's
trying to
way
get
beyond
people.
that. Yeah.
I think I want people to. I want. The word I use is ecological because it's like this
Yes.
thoughtfulness about what is in your place and what is what is thriving there and what is
Hmm.
what has volunteered to be there that you didn't that a human didn't have to put into that system. It's maple trees.
Absolutely.
It's like what are the sources of sugar? What are the sources of fruit in your ecosystem naturally? Let's work with that instead of like bringing in something that maybe you have to do all kinds of stuff to keep it alive there. Anyway, ecological is the word I use, but I think it's because sustainable is now tied to so many other things that are, and
You're
I'm sure
right.
ecological will soon be tied to all the wrong things too. But sustainable is tied to just like whatever. It's kind of meaningless
Hmm.
at this point. And I think what you're talking about is so much more interesting and so much more beneficial than that. So
Yeah. No, thank you for correcting me. No, that's that. No,
no, not a
after you
correction at
shared
all.
that,
I'm just
no, it
proposing
totally is.
something
No,
else.
because I think that's way, no, I think now that like you were talking, I was thinking about that. Like, no, that actually makes more sense. It is more ecological friendly to do because you're working with what is renewing on the planet in your area of where you live, what's
Yeah,
thriving. And
yeah.
you're being resourceful. You're being very resourceful. So no, I think that's the absolute correct term in this case. And we need to do
Oh,
more of that out here.
one of the things that you mentioned that I'm just jumping back because now
Mhm.
I missed my moment to cut in and give
Yeah,
like a
yeah, yeah.
little,
No, sorry.
but you talked about Tinturier, these sort of wild Tinturier grapes, and there are Alicante Boucher is one of the more
Mhm,
famous Tinturier grapes, and then they use Tinturier grapes to do like the big mega purple, mega red additive grape juice
mhm,
additives to make these commercial grocery store wines into big purple fruit bombs. Um,
mhm,
the cool thing about Tinturier, and like you said, there are, it seems like I know multiple hybrid varieties that are good wine grapes that are also Tinturier. Growing them in California, well, there's a couple benefits. Like I really think California is on the cusp of like a hybrid revolution, which I would love to be
mhm,
part of, and I'm
mhm,
hopefully speaking it partially into existence now. But one of the benefits is hybrids that are built for East Coast and Midwest, upper Midwest climates. They are bred to. I mean, their genetics know how to ripen grapes within like this really short window, like a 90 to 100-day window, versus a lot of vinifera, which needs maybe an extra month beyond that. And because they're used to colder climates, they're also able to sprout earlier. A lot of time, I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? Bud
mhm.
earlier.
Yep.
And so you could potentially in California be in barrel by mid-August before the crazy heat spikes and the fire season. And this is with hybrids. The other thing is with the Tinturier, if you do have a smoky harvest, you can press it you can just direct press it off the skins and still have a
Yep.
lovely wine that is red without
Mhm.
having the smoke taint because you can get rid of that smoke taint from the skins. Anyway, I'm just interjecting these little additional benefits to those things that you were mentioning about.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love that. And
So now,
like,
where were you in your in your journey before I interjected? um I mean, you're getting your mind blown in Vermont, and same with me. I think like what you are doing here, encapsulating them. I absolutely believe and have been saying this is the future of wine. It should be the future of wine. It will be the future of wine just by necessity.
Mhm.
And they're on the cutting edge out there just by necessity because it's like you can't just grow vinifera there. So you have to be resourceful, you have to be innovative. And that I
Mhm.
think has given them more of an ecological approach to wine because it's like you have to work with what does well there because you can't fight nature there. Like you don't have this gentle climate that you can put into anything you want. Like it has to be resilient, it has to be hardy. It has to be a
Mhm.
burly fruit that, a burly plant that, can handle those brutal cold winters and short summers. And yeah, and I think that the absence of that in California has like left us behind because we've just been, recultivate, like we've been growing for a market rather than for rather than adapting and changing as the world has changed.
Mhm.
And that market is, it's the global monoculture that you were talking about with just a handful of grapes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Yeah. No, you're right. You're definitely
but
right.
so
We need to
you're
jump
in
on
so you
that.
you're in Vermont getting your mind blown. That
Mhm.
I think that's where you were in your journey. If you want to pick it up
Yes.
or to say go wherever you want at this point.
Yeah, I was in Vermont getting my mind blown, and and with that, I just was fueled even more to really create something of my own while I'm still learning. And
Yeah.
I think that's for me, yes, it's very challenging. I mean, when you think of that as from an entrepreneurial standpoint, that's a huge risk. Like you don't know everything, you know that going into it, but when like I said earlier, if you surround yourself around the right people, the right and have the right connections that are strategic and it's a mutual feeling, it's a mutual win-win. That's another thing about me. Like when I connect with certain people, I want to make sure it's a benefit for both of us. It's a mutual benefit. And I want to see both of us win at the end of the day. So with that, when we share certain things with people in terms of, okay, what we want to do, how we want to grow, how we want to manifest something that we know is absolutely necessary to really diversify and make like the world more inclusive to like what it's focused on and what will aid it to transform into its best, then you got to be patient and you got to be very strategic about it. And I feel like for me that's what I was doing. I i was building relationships with people amongst building this brand
Mm.
before it was even LLC'd. And that was something where I knew, okay, so I know I'm going to have this friend, I'm going to have this person I can connect with here next time I'm out in Vermont, or these people, or these producers, And then during that time, I went back to Ohio after harvest and I was figuring out, okay, am I going to move out to Vermont or California now? And and I was figuring out, all the costs. I mean, both places are expensive to live in, very
Yeah.
expensive.
Yep.
And I said to myself while I was getting my pitch deck created, because at the time, I put all the money savings I had from working in the corporate world into moving out to California and then starting my business. So I knew I needed more capital though, because it's expensive to make wine. If I don't
Yeah.
know if anyone knows that.
Yeah.
It's expensive. It's an understatement. It's an understatement.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. And at some point we can all talk about how to make it a little more sustainable when it comes to the financial aspect
Yeah.
in this conversation. But with that, I knew, okay, grants are one option. I'm not going to take out loans. I want to get debt free capital to a degree, but what does that look like? So I said, why not have investors? So I created my first pitch deck and I pitched it to investors and I got my first funding, my first like startup funding. And or I guess they would call it seed funding in this
Yeah.
sense. And I moved out to California. I road tripped out there with my dad actually. And it was fun, a lot of fun. And as soon as I arrived the week of, I was connecting with more people. I was cultivating friendships out there with like-minded people. And I was immersing myself the very first week when it came into um, partnering with other wine producers who were millennials, or those who needed help with like bottling, with disgorging, with even like getting hands-on experience in vineyard work. And then eventually I met Christopher Renfro of 280 Project,
Uh-huh.
and he and I like, we were on Instagram for a little bit, here and there, like, connecting, communicating, supporting each other in terms of what we were doing, our endeavors. And this was around the time when he was really building and catapulting 280 Project in 2020, especially. And then 2021, he started the apprenticeship program. And he asked me, hey, you're more than welcome. He invited me to it. I said, yeah, because I want to get the hands-on experience in viticulture too. So that's what
Yeah.
I did. And I don't know if you know too much about 280. They, or
Yeah, I
yeah, do you
interviewed
know?
Chris. There's a great
Okay,
interview with Chris on here on the podcast.
awesome. Okay,
In library,
great.
yeah.
So I was going to say with that, that was a wonderful experience, a wonderful
Yeah.
hands-on learning experience, because I was one of, I want to say there were 10 of us, 10 up and coming wine cider producers, wine professionals, even, who were either in the wine industry, hospitality, or food industry at some point, and were striving to be either farmers and or wine producers. And this was a collaboration, like apprenticeship program involving UC Davis, in addition their viticulture and enology program, particularly Dr. Beth Forrestel, shout out to her,
Uh-huh.
and also Steve Mathiasen and Jill Mathiasen of Mathiasen Wines.
Yep.
So
Yep.
Steve is legendary in the vit and wine world, especially vit. I know he calls himself an ecologist first and foremost, so shout out to
Yeah.
Steve. With just pioneering regenerative farming practices in viticulture and
Yeah.
just farming in general. I mean, this guy, he is ahead of his time. Like, you need to check out, if he allows people to, you need to check out his global warming vineyard at some point. So it's really cool.
Awesome.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I was exposed to that. I was exposed to, putting in irrigation, installing that, to tilling, to, non-tilling, to fertilizing, with or without pesticides, organic pesticides, understanding, vineyard management, like in terms of contracts, even, okay, like the business side of certain things. And that's something, the people involved, like I said, all of us were in the wine. We all came from wine, food, hospitality already. However, our identities were marginalized. We all were BIPOC, queer, and women mostly.
Uh-huh.
And that's, I think, what was really fascinating and thrilling and refreshing to see, because we exemplify and illustrate what the future of wine, food, and beverage and community look like. And that was really cool, a lot of fun to do. And then also, developing more connections with getting more hands-on experience, traveling to all these different vineyards, orchard sites, even learning with people, educators, viticulturalists who are highly renowned in their industry, in this industry, I should say, scientists, even to CEOs, CFOs for prominent wineries in Napa to Sonoma, also the vineyard in Alamany Farm, or at Alamany Farm in San Francisco.
Yep.
So this was like the beginning. This was me walking through the door through where my future really was. And
What an
I also,
exciting beginning. Yeah.
yeah, right. Like, and this was all into this
You had a
all started
launch
like,
you had like a rocket launch pad for your start. That's amazing.
yeah. I mean, it was surreal, man. It was really surreal. And everyone around me, like my family, like even friends, Ellen and Scott of Tilted Shed, Cider
Yeah.
Works. Um, they're really good, really great friends. I consider them extended family for me up here.
So
And
everyone you've mentioned so far,
yeah.
I've interviewed except for except for Deirdre, and she has said yes to an interview. We just haven't nailed down a date. But yeah,
Oh
like I
yeah.
yeah. So there's like just anybody listening who wants to learn more about the people that you're talking about. There's an episode with everyone,
Yeah,
almost
I love
everyone.
it.
So
I
yeah,
love it. Oh my gosh. But yeah.
and
No, I love
yeah,
it.
and some of my
What have
favorite
you done
folks as
now?
well. I mean, I think yeah, I
Yeah.
think I mean, so yeah. Anyway, so again, like the our connections,
Hmm.
in terms of our journey, is so crazy. So sorry,
Hmm.
continue. I just wanted to throw
Oh no,
that in
you're
there.
fine. I love
Well,
it.
let me
No, you're
ask you.
totally fine.
Let me just in service of getting to more of what you're up to now. Like
Yeah.
tell me about what is the how are things going now? Like what is the unless there are some details that you need to bring into the story to make sure that we know where you are now. Please include them.
Yeah.
But also like
No,
what
wonderful.
like what how much are you producing? What kind of what's the what are you
What's
looking
the
at? What's
volume?
yeah, what's
Yeah,
your
no, great questions. Great questions. So yeah, so going back to like Tilted Shed, so I'm bringing them up as well, not only because they're amazing, amazing people, and they make amazing cider,
they really
and
do,
they're
yeah.
pioneers, but also, getting exposed to Horse and Plow. I worked with Horse and Plow Wine and Cider. I worked at a custom crush, so I was exposed to a lot. But I also did a collaborative wine like cider with Tilted Shed in 2021 when I launched my first vintage. Or I created my first vintage in
Yeah.
2021. And I did a apple Asian pear raw wildflower honey wine infused with fresh pink jasmine flowers with Tilted Shed, and it was a collaborative production with them and Sonoma County Bee Company, which is a woman-owned bee honey co-op in Sonoma County. And we produced this with apples and Asian pears coming from the only Afro Indigenous farm that organically farms the largest Asian pear orchard in the state of California, called Earthseed. And it's located in Sebastopol. So this,
Wait, it's
like,
called Earthseed?
yeah, it's called Earthseed Farm.
You know where that's from, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. They were
Okay.
inspired. They were totally inspired by it. I mean, if you check them
That's
out,
awesome.
I think it actually says on their website, because I came across them in an article courtesy of Ellen.
Okay.
She was the one that like told me about them. I'm like, oh my god, they are like 15 minutes away from us. She's like, yeah, and you need to meet Pandora Thomas. And I'm like, oh my god, like I read up on her. I was like, whoa. In
Awesome.
2020, this woman, she's black. She's a black woman. This black woman named Pandora Thomas, who has a background in just working with land. So she's been in land steward. She's been involved in agriculture and regenerative farming practice, especially permaculture farming, for quite some time educationally. And then she raised over, I want to say, about $20 million around 2020 to acquire this farm that has been owned by the coastal Miwok people for over 100 years. And when I found that out, I'm like, oh my God, I need to meet her. Like, oh my God. Around this time, like I said, this was 2021. So I was focused on like really immersing myself, connecting more with people, building my brand. Also, like I moved out to California in addition to, business and becoming a winemaker and a businesswoman, but also personally, like health wise, it's like Sonoma County. I love living up north because I'm around nature. I regenerate and re-energize around nature very well. And I'm surrounded by it every day up here. So from a wellness standpoint, I also moved out here for my own health. And with that, I loved how we were able to incorporate that with Tilted Shed into this collaborative wine that we created together. So we created about 48 cases of that, divided it up 50-50. So I got 24 cases, almost sold out of that. I think they may have like a few cases left. But with that, like, our goal is, in the future doing more collaborations as well when timing's right. And in addition to that, my 2021 volume was a little less than 200 cases total amongst four cuvées. So you have Sherehe, which was the collaboration between Tilted Shed and Sonoma County Bee Company. It means in Swahili celebration. So it's paying an
Uh-huh.
ode to the past, present, and future of life and the Black hidden figures in cider making, to the pan cultural ancestral practices that influenced the usage of pink jasmine flowers and honey
Mm.
that were infused and re fermenting the cider. So we technically made a sizer when you think about it.
Yeah.
If anyone knows what that is,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's another term in cider that I feel needs to be heard more. People need to be
Yeah.
paying more attention to, because honey is a natural sugar additive, and it's also a fermenter. But because of how viscous it is, you have to kind of dilute it. And in the past, people have used water, but we're not using water here. Remember, we're living in a drought. So use a little bit of cider. Use a tiny bit, mix it up. You can get that kick started. And with that, that's something I'm really interested in working more with. I mean, I am part Ethiopian on my mom's side of the family, and that's what also inspired me to create Sharehe, especially when you look up the whole background on it. And Ethiopians have been making honey fermented beverages for so long. I mean,
Yeah.
longer than European wine has ever existed. And
Yeah.
it was made it's made with herbs and water. However, of course, like with Sharehe, we don't add water, we added cider instead. So that's where it's more of a modern take on Tej, the Ethiopian honey wine, fermented honey
Yeah.
wine. And our herb replacement was pink jasmine. So with that,
Mm.
I decided to, you know, increase my volume in 2022. So in 2022's harvest, I came out with 8 different cuvées, one collaborative one, and we'll stay tuned on revealing who that is once timing is right. Because we've already bottled it. However, it is aging at the moment. It's going to be a sparkling Perry with Ribolla Gialla grape skins that were rehydrated with Asian pears.
Hmm.
And we're just really excited for that one to be unveiled when timing's right, and definitely introduce you to who that producer is. But with that, um, with that being said, I also produced more ciders this past year. I was able to produce a muscat, a skin contact muscat, uh, 10, 12 day. And that's another great grape, I feel like. Great grape.
Oh,
I don't know why I said
so
that.
great.
Great grape. Great grape.
I mean,
That's
have
another.
it's one of those where I probably have said this before, but when I taste the grapes, I'm like, oh, I maybe I shouldn't even make this into wine. It's so good just as a grape,
Yeah,
you know?
it's
Like,
too good. It's too
yeah.
good. But that's like, once that one, it's too good. And I mean that. I mean, once I'm planning on releasing that one a little later, like spring, summer, just FYI. But when that timing is right, I mean, I cannot wait for you all to taste her. Oh my God. She's so expressive. And I used Muscat Blanc. So I was able to produce about, I would say, total amongst all the cuvées, the projected amount for 2022, because not everything is bottled yet, mind you, will be a little less than 1,000 cases. So I'm coming from less than 200 cases in 2021 to 1,000, about 1,000 cases total of everything max
Yeah.
amongst 8 different cuvées. So that's a
That's
big, yeah.
that's a
That's
big jump.
it
Yeah.
is. And I did that intentionally with my like 10-year plan. I mean, I have a 10-year plan, mind you, Adam,
Right.
with
Good.
how, I'm growing and expanding, and eventually, it will involve more no-low beverages, meaning low alcohol, non-alcoholic beverages down the line, because that's where I feel we're heading as a
Yeah.
society. And people don't want to jeopardize the flavor. They don't want to jeopardize the high qualityness. So that is the next focus for Mad Marvelous, is transitioning to, you know, not
Some
only like growing, but also adding on to the collection for people who may or may not be able to drink alcohol. Okay. Like, I mean, the highest ABV alcoholic wine I produce is 13.3%, and that's Mad Maxine. Only because it's like, a tannic red. It's a tannic
Yeah.
red. So with
Yeah.
that, I have on the other side of the spectrum, like Shiraz, that's the lowest one. That's 7%.
Yeah.
7% alcohol. And we did that intentionally because we wanted it to be a wellness based like beverage, wine like beverage, and that's what it is. So
Yeah.
it's a great alternative to champagne. I
Yeah.
mean, and all these other sparkling wines because it behaves like wine. I mean, it's not as carbonated and it is dry, but it's very refreshing in a way where it makes you feel good afterwards. From
Yeah.
everyone that has purchased it, tasted it, along with Palm Quincy, same thing. They love how it makes them feel afterwards. Like they can function. They're
Yeah.
functional beverages. And that's another key thing with the future of Mad Marvelous. We're focused on making more of those. We're focused
Nice.
on working with herbalists, with foragers, in addition to expanding our team eventually, and then collaborating more with producers, whether it's in the United States or out of the United States or both. So I'm really excited for that timing, and I can't wait to like share and unveil more with you all when it comes to what's next for Mad Marvelous and how, and also in the future we're going to be doing dining experiences where, I mean, all my wines and ciders are foodie friendly. I don't know if I shared this at the beginning, but my very first job ever, like legally, was at 15 and it was in food. I worked at Cold Stone Creamery
Oh,
and
nice.
and I grew up in a foodie family. I grew up around cooking in the kitchen with my dad and soul food and I didn't grow up around wine, mind you, and that came while I was in college, the exposure, and then eventually realizing I want to be able to elevate wine to an art form the way I create it.
Yeah.
And respected on the same level as fine wine and cider that Europeans respect.
Yeah.
So that's something where I feel knowing my mindset, knowing my goals, knowing my vision, my talent, my gifts, and my skill, I can do that. I can make that happen. However, I also know with that, community investment to a degree would help with that along the lines when timing's right. So, with that being said, access to space, larger space, that's a challenge for me right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Like that's a challenge for a lot of small producers,
Yeah.
especially
Me
cider
me too.
producers.
Me too.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And
Like,
I'm in
and
Los Angeles, so it's
it's
even trickier
insane.
here. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, I think there's only a few producers down there that have their own space, right? Like,
That's right.
there's,
Yeah.
and those who do, it's very small because I think of the zoning purposes and just how expensive it is, like, to get to just lease or own down there, like the
Exactly.
commercial buildings or,
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway,
Thank you. You are you are singing my
yeah.
song.
Yeah,
Um
I mean,
yeah.
we feel it up here too. So, I mean, with that, it's something I know is a problem that I feel there's always been a solution for. It's a matter of how sustainable that solution is. And when you factor in like the workplace, the winery workplace, or workplaces in general in the wine industry and the food industry, um, I've realized, being in that arena, I've been in food overall. If you were to like sum up all the experiences I had in food, working in food, because it was on and off amongst working in corporate, as I shared, amongst
Yeah.
wine, it overlapped as well. I probably worked in food on and off for about 15 years. And it was longer than wine, mind you. That's what a lot of people don't know about me. I feel like,
Mm.
as I tell people, I feel like I've lived many different lives for how young I am already. I mean, because it's a lot. It is a lot. Like when people, and I'll admit that it is a lot, but I just learn best through hands on experience. I learn very well, very quickly through hands on experience where I can apply it and execute it successfully and teach others how to do it. So I've been able to do that along the way.
Yeah.
Being in training and development, all of that, coaching leaders even. But I feel like I can apply those same skills now to what I'm building with my other business, which is the Bathing Collective. And I feel like that is a solution that will help so many people, not only the community, the economy, the ecosystem, but especially marginalized people. And I
What
came
is
up with,
can you describe the bathing collective? How is that a
yeah,
business? Yeah,
yeah.
like what is
So the Bathing Collective will be the first for-profit like lifestyle company that is going to be more focused on having a network. I should say a lifestyle network like company with co-shared workspaces that are for creatives, food, wine, beverage professionals and educators and consumers. And it's think of it more of like originally we I was thinking, okay, this is this a co-op? Because originally I was thinking this would be a for-profit worker owned and community owned winery and farm cooperative.
yeah.
And then I was thinking to myself, well, if we want the community to invest in us, they need to understand like this is a multi-enterprise, but we don't want to talk corporate, right? We don't want to be like that. But
Right,
that's what
right.
we are. I mean, we're going to have multiple income streams built within this infrastructure that happens to house different co-shared workspaces that would include a winery, a culinary commercial kitchen with chefs who can share that space, and a farm or land partnerships, or I should say both, and or land partnerships where we work with local farmers and starting in Sonoma County, Sacramento, like Northern California, comes to building that network of people that we know want to share the wealth. They want to share their resources in return. They want some form of equity or they want some form of royalties. And that's what we're working on. That's why the Bathing Collective is a business. It is a
Got it.
community organization and it is a business. That's what it is. And that's why I feel like it after talking with the team, because there is a team behind this as well, that involves chefs and wine producers and cider producers and people who are in the wellness community as well, like wellness business, I should say. So, ranging from, honey to cannabis to fitness to all those other aspects to
Got it.
just different, just cultivating creative experiences, even and artists. And this is supposed to be not just for us having accessible space to create our products, create service, provide service, create educational seminars and spearhead them in community atmospheres, community spaces like Kinfolks, but also in Oakland, but also
Uh-huh.
with that, they're there for us to have and create a living income for those who invest into this business and work part of it too, help create the products. So that is what the Bathing Collective will be. We're in the process of raising funds for it because we know grants and our own, personal savings are not going to be enough. They're not going to suffice. And knowing the fact that we know the worker owners will have some form of equity in this. They do.
Yeah.
And we want to open it up for the community as well. We want to open it up for private investors, angel investors, venture capitalists to a degree. But we also want to make sure, that piece of the pie, is justifiably given or provided or invited to people we know who are really on the same like level as us, like mindset wise,
Yeah.
like in
Yeah.
terms of the like mindedness. Like they understand we're mission driven. This is for the future. This is
Right.
why I tell people like that I was sharing this too earlier on before talking more about it publicly back in late 2020, early 2021. Um, I said, this is bigger than me. This is supposed
Yeah.
to be bigger than me. This is not just like a solution for Mad Marvlus to have their own space, have a
Y-
piece of equity in a form of real estate that is very rare for people who look like me to have right now. But I know
Yeah.
that's changing. I am a black woman who happens to not only own her own wine business, but is also the producer of it. And it's a natural wine and cider business. It's one that uses organic fruit. It's one that focuses and strives for high quality products. And on top of that, when I see there are friends of mine and people all over California, and I know it's like it's even more challenging when you go further out east. When you see natural wine and cider producers as small as me, I am a small wine and cider producer right now. And I don't see myself, exceeding more than 10,000 cases like for my brand because I don't want to be a big wine brand. I want to focus on high quality over quantity. I want to
Yeah.
focus on people understanding that. And I know there's so many other small producers in that same mindset, that same mission driven mindset where they want to work together. They want to share equity in a space that has a winery, that has the ability to also allow cider producers to produce their product in without any like issues with cross contamination or Brett or anything like that, or have like a area where you could do co-ferments and that's not a problem, and then area for brewing at some point. But to start, because a lot of us out here who are in the beverage industry and entrepreneurs, production entrepreneurs, we are winemakers and we need our own space and we are willing to share that space together, share resources, share the equipment, and also put in the work to build our own house brand of the business that we each have equity in. And we also, on top of that, for those who are employees or work for the business, they get a living income. So we are revolutionizing. I feel like along with Calche, they are doing a wonderful job out in Vermont, and I love how they're pioneering it. To Robert Clay in Texas, Austin Winery, we need to do something out here that reflects the landscape of what the landscape needs, of what our community makeup needs, what our ecosystem needs. And we need the Bathing Collective to exist, not only in Sonoma County, not only in East Bay, not only in Sacramento, knowing that's an up and coming wine region. It had wine country prevalence back in the 1800s, early
Yeah.
1900s, and then now it's coming back a little bit.
Yeah.
People are realizing native grapes. Native grapes are another one I know we didn't talk too much about, but along with hybrid grapes, native grapes are part of the future of where wine is heading. And there's a lot of native grapes that grow out in that aspect of California. And I know
Yeah.
near LA. I know down in LA, there's quite a few like abandoned vineyards. There's a lot of that. And knowing we
Oh
are
yeah.
strategically placing these TBC satellite campuses that have winery co-ops inside of them, and you have a specific number of winemakers, cider producers. They can either go on tiers of being worker partners to having part ownership in TBC, and then also getting a living income, and then eventually being eligible for royalties within 5 to 10 years or something of that sort, because we want to be able to put the money back into the business, let it grow a little bit
Yeah. Yeah.
before we really reap the benefit. And then have employees, actually have employees, and then have custom crush clients at some point as well. So we see that's why I said we are a multi-enterprise without being corporate about it. Okay, we
Yeah.
are. And having a commercial kitchen, that's a whole other program right there.
Yeah.
It's a whole other program. I mean, we're not only going to be producing products like on the winery side that are house brand, we're also going to be producing dining experiences, traveling ones. Okay, traveling ones that are strategically placed in different places all over the United States, that are very cultural driven, to those internationally eventually, where we partner with chefs that are known as TBC partners, those who, work with us, and along with wine producers, cider producers as TBC partners, those are individuals who work with us and have the opportunity to gain mutual exposure, marketing wise, social media wise, We champion each other basically, but they also will have the opportunity in the future to own or be eligible to own equity in the business. And we would be able to, for instance, if let's say it's a coffee shop that becomes like a TBC partner, they have equity in us or we have equity in them, vice versa. And then in return, we champion for each other marketably, publicly, products, services. And then we, negotiate, hey, we get to use your resources, such as your venue space, okay? Like without any additional cost because we have ownership in that or whatever the situation is in terms of ownership in TBC. So
Got it.
this is where I feel like we're heading, and in terms of like the land partnerships, farms, we're not
Yeah.
only going to own equity in land, we're also going to have land partnerships because I
Yeah.
feel like that's a smart move to take, knowing there's so many elderly who own farmland and they may not have descendants, they may not have people who really want to take on that responsibility and really cultivate the land more in a regenerative way and eventually like certified organic way. Of course, it takes time, it takes a few years, but
Yeah.
that's the goal. You want to be as regenerative as possible. And that's what we strive for as well is that balance. It's not just, human beings, people having a living life balance and able to like really fuel their lives however way, if it's educationally, entrepreneurially, with their business. Like we want to be able to provide those resources for them, apprenticeships, internships, and that's where land partnerships would help tremendously because
Sure.
if we're providing the education platform for people to come in and intern and apprentice with us, whether it's in viticulture, whether it's in gardening, medicinal herbs, you name it, like all of that, or in the winery, even, or, if they're out in the orchard, they can be assigned to certain areas while still getting paid for their apprenticeship, for their internship, because we've all been there. For those who've
Yeah.
worked harvest, okay, it's a challenge to get a living pay, especially if you're traveling outside of the state of California
Yeah.
to work harvest, okay, or anywhere in the world, right?
Yeah.
Anywhere, and it's not just California, but anywhere. And then again, you got to worry about housing. So that's another thing. We
Yeah.
want to make sure the housing situation is already taken care of or at least available as an
Yeah.
option for them if they don't have accommodations, because that is a stress that they don't need. I mean, I've had it. I know a lot of people have had it with harvests and with internships as well and apprenticeships. So we want to be able to put those people at ease and really focus on why they're there, and that's learning and
Yeah.
helping like cultivate the land and also get paid like what they deserve, a
Yeah.
living income based on like what the state or the area of where they are is for the bathing collective, because I feel like it will vary for the most part because of the cost of living in certain areas, but we want to make sure it's consistent across the board. But those are details, of course, we would discuss more when that timing is right. But for the most part, that's what the bathing collective is. It's the future of where we're
Okay.
heading.
Got it.
And
Yeah. Let me
knowing
ask.
diverse and inclusive enterprise is the future. We are an example of that.
Got it. Let me ask you maybe this is a good question to end on.
Hmm.
But just going back to your approach to and perspective on wine, which obviously is much bigger than what I think the idea of wine has been up until recently, because of people like you. Um, how how is that received in the area where you're doing that? And obviously, it sounds like you're finding people who are who share that vision. But has there been any difficulty in, or just I don't know, any pushback, whether it's not like direct pushback or confrontation or anything like that, but do you find, I don't know, yeah, what's the reception of this approach been in the area that you are in, which is really wine capital
Hmm.
America, essentially?
Yeah, no, that's a great
Well,
question. I mean,
not wine. It's not wine capital America. It's the sort of the colonial vision of wine capital of
Yeah,
America,
that's
the
true.
the
That's true.
imported wine capital of America.
Hmm. Yeah. So the leading economic contributor in wine in the United States.
Right, right,
Yeah,
yeah.
California.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're in the
Right now.
epicenter, and being there in Sonoma, Sonoma, Napa, that little area is also the epicenter of
Hmm.
California, I'd say, for wine at the
Hmm.
moment.
Yeah, and cider. I feel like Sonoma County is on the come
I
up.
think you're
Is on the
absolutely
come up.
right. Yep,
Yeah, it's on
yep,
the come up.
absolutely.
That's you're going to see more of that in the future as well, especially natural wine,
Yeah.
especially natural cider,
Yeah.
involving grapes as well. But
But I mean,
anyway,
even that, I guess
with
that
that,
brings up
oh
that's to
yeah,
my question really, is like, even cider, I imagine, gets a little
yeah,
pushback. I mean, I know there's has been a trend of just ripping out these old orchards to plant
hmm
Pinot Noir vineyards, in Sonoma.
hmm
And so there, that's a form of pushback. And I guess, are you seeing that change? Are you seeing more of, status quo winemaking? And, or, are you seeing your perspective being embraced or being rejected or being dismissed or anything
hmm
like that in that environment where, you know where these things, where that, we have a very traditional, like, 5 grape monoculture. But, and when
yeah.
I say very traditional, I mean, in the last 50 years it's become traditional, but it never was before that.
hmm No, that's a great question. I would say yes. I think people are becoming more receptive and more welcoming. They're more curious. I feel like initially when it comes to, you know, being introduced to Mad Marvelous and the fact that, I made Janet Delight an apple grape wine, the sustainable byproduct of Mad Maxine. I reused those grape skins with Carignan, from Horse and Plow, and rehydrated them with Newtown Pippin apples and Rhode Island Greening apples.
Mm,
So that I feel like people are going to see more of, and as long as it tastes delicious and it's good and it's high quality, I feel like people are going to be more welcoming of it once they get their heads wrapped around, like, oh wait, this is like Paquette, right? Because Paquette has been like, I mean, people had to wrap their head around that for a moment when they realized, wow, this is like a revived ancient technique that people used, around the time of like when the Mediterranean was very prominent and in terms of making wine and the peasants getting like the sustainable byproduct to just enjoy after a long harvest day. So, I mean,
yeah,
it's quite interesting how we're going from that, and we're seeing how the past is kind of repeating itself a little bit, or I shouldn't say repeating itself, but it's like it's more influential towards how we're thriving, how we're figuring out how to thrive in our industries and in this world, how we're trying to work with nature a little bit more and be innovative, but also being open to repurposing certain things
yeah,
and just creating. I feel like this is a time where we're experiencing a renaissance. I've talked to quite a few people
yeah,
about this already. Like I felt it since 2020 before
yeah,
Beyonce like came out with her album. But anyway, um, with that, I feel like a lot of people did, and with that, you see a lot more creative happenings, right? Like you see a
yeah,
lot of that. And I feel like more consumers who are becoming more predominantly millennial and Gen Z, and I know baby boomers, they're still there. Okay, we got some traditionalists still there too, but it's mainly millennials and Gen Z we need to focus more on because they're focused on working with climate change. They're focused on striving for a better future, for wellness. And that's what Mad Marvelous is about. I mean, they're
yeah,
not afraid of reviving ancient techniques as long as they're useful, as long as they get the job done, right? You
yeah,
know, And I feel like the way I produce my wines and ciders as naturally as possible, I'm not afraid to use sulfur, but I try to minimize that as much as possible. And if it's unnecessary, I won't add any. So, and if I see there's volatile acidity in one of my wines or ciders, I know how to respond to it. I work with nature, not against it. I don't sulfur the shit out of it or anything like that, or add any artificial things that should not be there that are masking the personality. So, for instance, palm quincy, the one of the main reasons why I infused it with lemon verbena and chamomile is because it had some volatile acidity before I bottled it. And
Got it.
I realized with Roman chamomile, I don't know if anybody out here is like geeking out over like the differences between German or Roman chamomile here. But
I love it. I love it.
with that, Roman chamomile has more of that honey note to it. Like it's
Okay.
still a yellow floral note, but it has a nice aromatic and flavor profile that resembles honey, like
Okay.
wildflower honey a little bit. So when you infuse it, and I only infused this with the lemon verbena that kind of helped elevate the volatile acidity. And I feel like the Roman chamomile with the German chamomile blend, it just like made everything smoother and more
Yeah.
texturized. It kind of like smoothed out and texturized the volatile acidity, and that's why it is a bestseller. I feel like because the complexity
Wow.
and people, and it's kind of fizzy too, but like it's not like a true sparkling wine like Shiraz. And
Right.
that's exactly why like I feel people are becoming more receptive to it because one, I've had feedback from people who did not like cider before they've had my cider, Palm
Right.
Quincy.
Right.
And they're like, this doesn't even taste like Crispin or Angry Orchard or Golden State. This is
Of
like, this
course.
tastes
Yeah.
like a wine. This tastes like a wine. I'm like, but it, and they were asking me like, wait, and there's no grapes in here? I said, no, it's just apples and quince. That's it. And
Yeah.
there's lemon verbena and chamomile. That's it. So what does that sound like to you? That sounds like a wellness beverage almost, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so people are
A
focused on drinking
tonic.
more functional. Yeah, a tonic almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a 10% tonic. But but with that like that's something I feel people are like once they're introduced to it more, and that's why expanding my brand, you know, being able to ship across the United States and have enough in volume to do that, that I feel the exposure is what they need, and
Yeah.
then that's really going to help them understand. I mean, out in Vermont, they already got it on lock. They already got it on lock. Like in
Yeah.
terms of like they produce. I know quite a few producers out there produce their wines and ciders similar to how I do.
Yeah.
Or I should say, we practice similar things,
Yes. Yeah.
and I've also been inspired by them. So that's
Yeah.
another thing too. I mean, I saw what they were doing, and I'm like, oh my god, like why didn't I like no one else is doing this like out here. Like what? Like this is crazy. Like this is something if you read deep in history, like I said, you're gonna find this is like what indigenous were doing. This is what enslaved black people were doing. This is to survive as
Yep.
medicine, like they were working with the land. They were working with natural resources, native grapes. I mean, I got to give a shout out to Matt Meese of North American Press because he's another. I don't know if you've talked to him yet, but
Oh yeah. Yep.
you have.
Yes,
Okay,
definitely have.
awesome. All right, so
Matt is like on my speed dial. Yeah.
oh my god, I love it. Okay, so I need to listen to more podcasts first of all. Like I listen to a lot of music. I need to listen to more podcasts. So I'm glad to hear that you've talked to quite a few people that have been very influential and inspiring for me.
Yeah, no. Well,
So
and I think
yeah,
similar to you, I'm going to put you in that group where I really all of you guys are really forging what I think is the future if we're going to have one in wine in
we
California. So
will.
it's
We
yeah.
will. We
Yeah.
need we need the rest of
Right.
the
No,
the
I
rest. We will. That's why we
yeah.
need big wine companies to invest in us
There you
because
go.
they're
Yeah.
the ones who are willing to put in the work to, as Matt and I have talked about, become a vineyard chaser.
Yeah.
go after those really unique sites that are hard to find with being funded by these big wine companies. If they want to be on the good side of history with working with climate change, not against it, then we need to
Yeah.
search for more fruit like that. Native grapes that taste delicious, getting innovative, um, and creating them as naturally as possible. Give us the space to do that. Give us the resources to do that because that's what the people want. They want more innovative products. I feel
Yeah.
like I said, I'm going back to Pinot and Chardonnay. There's always going to be a market. Don't get me wrong. There's always going to be one because there's always going to be a consumer group who just loves that. Okay.
Yeah.
No matter the price, no matter the price. And I know in the future, Pinot and Chard, I did share. I feel it's not going to be very relevant in the future because they can't keep up with climate change at all. So hybrid grapes we're gonna see more of those. We're gonna see more native grapes. So
Yep.
with that, invest in cultivating the land more or in businesses more that are interested in still salvaging the wine industry, but we're willing to do it in a more innovative way.
Yeah.
Like
I'm
we've already
really,
have a benchmark. We already have proof
yeah.
of concept. Okay.
Yeah.
Matt already has proof of concept with
Yeah.
how you can produce a delicious hybrid grape wine with native grapes in it. Okay. Like as naturally as possible. All right. Like, and create a
Yeah.
sustainable byproduct after that,
Yeah.
like,
I,
so
I'm, I,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, for anybody, this is like, I want to talk to just for a second for anybody, not that anybody at this point is listening who is like a big cab, vineyard owner in Napa, but
Mhm.
I mean, maybe on the off chance that those people come across Matt's 2022 Baco Noir, I mean, to see what's
Mhm.
potential, like I taste it in barrel
Mhm.
and I'm like, this would, like,
Yeah. It would rival.
I mean, it will just end the argument of like, or it will just change people's mind. Like, there is
Yeah.
no point in thinking less of hybrids once you have a wine like Matt's
Yeah.
2022. Like, it's
It's
just a
delicious.
stunningly beautiful, delicious, as good as anything that's being made in Sonoma or Napa, hands
Yeah.
down, full stop. Like, it's fantastic. And I'm sure
Absolutely.
there are others like that. I'm sure your wines are similar. I just haven't had as many. I just have had his. And it's one of those where it's like, it's just it's like a single variety of
Yeah.
a hybrid grape. And you can just be like,
Absolutely.
okay, right. What he doesn't spray it, on the Sonoma coast. It's like,
Mhm. Mhm.
this is what's possible, for anybody, just from an economic standpoint, anybody who wants to like reduce their input costs, hybrids,
Yeah.
like, and without fear of reducing the quality.
Mhm.
Done. Anyway,
Yeah.
I've
Yeah, you're right.
so
And
anyway,
people would have, and the big wine companies, the people who invest in us will know, okay, they have people who are willing to cultivate the land, who are willing to vineyard manage, who have the skill and the expertise and the knowledge to do that. I mean, there would be a larger team, a legion, an army of people that would
yeah,
be involved with the bathing collective to do all of this. I mean, where it's cultivated in a regenerative way where machinery is not involved heavily in the process. I mean, it's the way that like natural low intervention wine producers would utilize and cultivate the land if they're farmers as well, if they're vignerons.
yeah,
So with that, it's absolutely necessary. Like what Matt is doing is part of the future. What I'm doing, Mad Marvlus is part of the future. What Cal
for
Che
sure.
is doing is part of the future. All the people out in Vermont, Erin of American Wine Project, what she's doing out in Wisconsin with hybrids, she's doing amazing things. What they're doing in Austin Winery, with Ash Wines, Adrian Ash, you know, they're growing amazing grapes down there, working with the climate in Austin, Texas, and such a phenomenal finesse, and making gorgeous ass wines in the
Yeah,
process. Like we're gonna see up and coming wine regions that you would not ever that your grandparents would never fathom existed in the first place in the South, out east, in other areas of California. You're gonna
yeah,
see a shift of what that makeup looks like, even more when it comes to ownership, when it comes to equity, when it comes to land partnerships, collaborations, to co-shared spaces. All of that, is what is part of the bathing collective, and that would exemplify why it is very important for the community and big companies to invest in the future, to invest in us. And
And
that's something where I feel like even with Mad Marvelous, like I tell people, that's why I'm predominantly DTC. I will always be predominantly DTC because I want people to experience not only Mad Marvelous but a part of me, because Mad Marvelous is a part of me, and I'm a I'm someone who loves cultivating
mm.
immersive storytelling experiences about my wine. Like I feel like people
You and I are
really
so
like,
similar. It is ridiculous.
yeah,
It's
it's
like
like, I mean, I like
this is
storytelling. I love
yep.
storytelling.
Yep. This is
So,
that's
I
my
mean,
tradition. Yeah, like that's exactly. I mean, honestly, like the wine is almost an excuse. Like if I can't tell the story, it's
yeah.
like why am I even making wine? Like if this like I mean, that's what I think about when I go to make decisions about wine making is like
Hmm.
is there a story to tell here? If not, like maybe I'll just get the grapes from or the fruit from somewhere else or maybe I'll make something more interesting out of it by blending it with something. I start thinking about like why am I doing this? And if there isn't a story there, like what like I have like my reason for making it goes away. I don't want to just make a nice wine. I
Hmm.
want a nice wine that's got a great story as well, and
Yeah.
is
That's
for
like,
has it's like a mission based wine. It's like it's got a
yeah.
story to tell on its own.
That's why I
You
love like oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna add one thing. That's what I love about like what Fable Farm and La Garagista,
right?
along with like Ethan of Iapetus, do with their wine experiences out there. I
Yeah,
mean, I would love to like do something like that out in Vermont, like with
yeah.
Mad Marvelous in the future, when timing's right. And they know I'm overdue for visiting, first of all. They all know that. Anyway, I'll just say a few things here. So to just really have us go throughout our day. Um, when it comes to Mad Marvelous, you can always purchase direct through me, through my website. I am going to be launching a brand new website very soon, so stay tuned for that in the next couple of days. And then it will be madmarvelous.com that you all should visit to purchase the rest of my 2021 vintage creatures. So Janet Delight, Sharehe, Mad Maxine, and Palm Quincy. And then in the next couple of months, stay tuned for the 2022 vintage because I'll be releasing some delicious, wonderful, beautiful, highly aromatic, decadent wines I'm very proud to share with the world, in addition to so many other experiences with you all that I'm going to invite you all into when it comes to just really understanding more of Mad Marvelous. And stay tuned for more expansion, and then
Yeah.
also when it comes to the bathing collective, we have our first fundraising event on Sunday, March 26th at Kinfolks in Oakland. That's a black owned coffee shop slash culture slash wine bar slash community space that is thriving right now and is all about really elevating the community for its very best in however way through collaboration. We are
Now,
partnered with Co-Fermented and Shitty
when is
Wine
that?
Memes. That's on Sunday, March 26th. 15 natural wine and cider producers that are predominantly BIPOC, queer, and women that make bomb ass, high quality beverages. We're also going to have some non alcoholic options, in addition to chefs as well, who are going to be presenting food for you all to have. And then at the end, you all get some wellness goodie bags from our sponsors. So some of our sponsors are Liquid IV, Sonoma County Bee Company, Potley, and we have so many more that we can't wait to share with you all. But in the meantime, I had such a pleasure talking with
Oh
you
my
today,
God.
Adam. This is
I am
this
so
is
glad
refreshing.
that we talked. Like I can't tell you. I mean, I just will say that as my way of thanking you, you've said everything that I would have wanted to say, and you just made my job easy because I could just ask you to speak, and I don't have to say anything because so much alignment, and it's so great to talk to you and to meet you. Thank you so much for your time and sharing all this.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me on.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out to a couple other sponsors for this podcast who didn't get mentioned at the top, but who have incredible services and things that may help you, that might benefit the world, and they will be listed in our show notes. That's and you can find them at earth and mention you heard about them here. And the other one is Catavino Tours, and that's catavinotours.com/OWP, and just mention you heard about them here on the Organic Wine Podcast, which will also benefit the podcast. And those services are fantastic. You will find out, provides bottles for winemakers. So if you are a winemaker, you might really want to look into them. And Catavino Tours provides gorgeous luxury tours in Portugal and Spain, and they care very much about reducing the ecological impact of travel for these purposes and making it a much more meaningful and beneficial experience for everyone involved. So check them out and enjoy.